My name is Staff Sergeant Mara Ellison, 31 U.S. Army Combat Engineer. I faced IEDs in Kandahar and dust storms that turned daylight black, but nothing cut deeper than my father's voice across that dinner table. He set down the gift I brought from Germany and said, "You have 48 hours. Get out." They thought they'd broken me. They just triggered a full-scale reclamation. What would you do if your own family treated you like a soldier under command? Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe for more echoes of revenge. 2 deployments, 1 rotation in Germany. And one thing I thought I'd learned, that enemies wear different uniforms. I was wrong. The ones I faced that night were wearing Sunday clothes. The dining room smelled of roasted beef and rosemary, the kind of meal reserved for holidays or homecomings. My mother had set the good china, the porcelain with the gold trim we only used for Christmas. She'd even folded the napkins into those little triangles she learned from some lifestyle show. It looked like celebration, but the air carried something else. The hum of the overhead light, the faint tremor of silverware against the table. It was too quiet for joy. I sat at the end of the table, posture straight out of habit, watching my father across from me. Victor Ellison, retired foreman, voice like a drill instructor, eyes that never softened. To his right, my mother, Anne, hands folded neatly on her lap. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I noticed how her gaze skipped over the empty chair beside me. My brother's seat. Evan, the prodigal son, was off chasing gallery dreams in Seattle, yet somehow still owned more of this house than I did. I reached down beside my chair, lifted a small box, and slid it toward my father. "Picked this up in Bavaria," I said, keeping my tone calm, measured. He peeled the paper slowly. Inside lay a multi-tool knife, engraved on the handle. "For the man who taught me to build." A bridge, that's what I wanted it to be. He turned it in his hands, nodded once, not in gratitude, but inspection. Then he set it down beside his plate with the same motion you'd use to discard a receipt. The silence thickened. The smell of gravy, the faint ticking of the old wall clock, the weight of unsaid things, all of it pressing in. He looked up finally, his voice even, command tone engaged. "Mara, you've got 48 hours. Get your things and move out of this house." At first, I thought I misheard. The words came out like an order given on the range. Short, final, non-negotiable. "Excuse me." He didn't flinch. "Evan's coming back. He needs a home base while he gets his footing. Your army, you move around, you don't need roots." My fork stopped midair. I looked at my mother. She didn't speak. She just stood, gathered my plate, half a meal still untouched, and carried it to the sink. The scrape of the chair leg sounded like a verdict. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't dinner. It was reassignment. Inside, training took over. Assess, adapt, execute. No visible emotion. My eyes scanned the room. Framed photos, polished table, repaired ceiling above. I'd replaced that drywall myself after the last storm using my deployment pay. Same pay that had kept this house afloat when the mortgage nearly folded. I inhaled once, slow, through the nose. "Copy," I said quietly. Not yes, not agreement, just acknowledgement. The same response you give a superior officer before you carry out a mission you don't believe in. My mother didn't meet my eyes. My father cut another piece of beef, chewing like the matter was settled. The house creaked under winter wind, and I could hear the faint whistle through the new window frames, the ones I'd installed. I looked at the table again. The tool, untouched. My father's hand beside it, still and steady. The man who had taught me control, and now demanded obedience. Out the window, a porch light flicked on across the street. Mr. Burke, retired Marine, kept his yard immaculate. He was probably setting his alarm for dawn. I wondered if he could see through this window, if he knew this wasn't a homecoming. It was an eviction. I kept my voice level. "Understood, sir." It wasn't sarcasm. It was habit. He grunted, a sound halfway between approval and dismissal, and reached for his coffee. My mother turned off the stove. The dinner plates cooled. The roast grew gray at the edges, and the air smelled faintly of iron. By the time I stood to leave, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the refrigerator. I'd been issued a deadline. But what they didn't know was, soldiers don't abandon their posts. They recon, regroup, and reclaim. I left the dining room without a word. The hallway smelled like lemon polish and old carpet. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked steady enough. Training has a way of borrowing your muscles when your mind is still catching up. In the morning, I treated myself like a mission site. Sanitize the battle space. Cold shower, no steam. Shock the system. Clear the fog. I brushed my hair back into a tight bun out of habit, then stared at the closet. Civilian hoodie or uniform? I chose neither. Jeans, boots, a plain field jacket. I wasn't projecting menace. I was projecting order. I made the bed with hospital corners, pulled the top sheet smooth, aligned the pillows, stripped the room of anything that felt personal. I wasn't nesting. I was staging a controlled withdrawal. When I finished, the place had the blank, sterile calm of a barracks room ready for inspection. Loadout on the dresser. Phone, wallet, keys, home binder, a fat folder of receipts and contractor invoices I'd kept for years, and a small flash drive labeled House. I slid everything into my pack and stepped into the cold. The 24-hour diner at the edge of town had cracked red booths and a coffee pot that never slept. The waitress with tired eyes topped me off without asking. Across from me, a family shared pancakes, the kind of quiet happiness that doesn't make noise. I pulled a napkin from the dispenser, uncapped my pen, and wrote in block letters, Operation Homefront Reclaim. I broke it down like any OPORD. Simple, clear, doable. Primary objective, recover assets, restore legal status, protect credit. Secondary objective, put the truth on paper, no drama, documents only. Constraints, no escalation, all contact through counsel, maintain chain of custody. Phases emerged without effort. Phase 1, Intel Recon. Confirm liens, loans with parcel number. Pull county recorder index, note instrument numbers. Request fraud alerts at all 3 bureaus. Identify notary records tied to any new instruments. Phase 2, Fortify alliances. Bank insider for off-the-record red flags. Legal counsel who speaks both civil and criminal. Community witnesses with credible standing. Phase 3, Asset extraction. Move only items with receipts. Veteran-owned movers, manifest with serials and dates. Sign-offs, leave copies. Phase 4, Legal assault. File FTC identity theft affidavit. Police report, incident number. Recorder challenge to void fraudulent instrument. Demand bank fraud unit freeze and bureau cleanup. At the bottom, I drew a box around 2 words. No contact. I wasn't going to be baited into hallway arguments or porch theatrics. The paper would do the speaking. I started with intel. At the register, I asked for a clean receipt and wrote the time, 07:12, in the top corner. It sounds silly, but timestamps build a rhythm. They remind you that you're not drifting. You're moving. In the parking lot, I sat in the truck and opened my phone. First call, Equifax. Then Experian. Then TransUnion. I placed fraud alerts on my file and requested copies of my reports. Each call finished with a confirmation number. I wrote them down on the margin of the napkin and took a photo. Redundancy is a kindness to your future self. Next, I pulled up the county recorder's public index, typed the parcel number from an old tax bill, and waited for the search wheel to spin. 3 entries I expected. Original mortgage, satisfaction, refinance I'd arranged 2 years ago to lower their payment. And then a 4th, stamped 6 months ago, Equity Access HELOC. The instrument number glared like a strobe. Right away, Phase 2. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Caleb Romano. We'd been lab partners in sophomore chemistry. Now he worked loans at First Montana Bank. I called and kept my voice flat. Caleb, it's Mara Ellison. Off the record, can you run a red flag check against a HELOC tied to my parents' parcel? I'm seeing something I shouldn't. He exhaled. You know I can't disclose client data. I'm not asking for balances, I said. Just whether anything trips your fraud filters, signature mismatch, notary anomalies, timing issues. If you can't say yes, silence is fine. He paused. Give me an hour. I hung up and made the second call. Jenna Cho. We'd met downrange when she wore JAG brass. Now she was a civilian attorney who still briefed like a captain. Jenna, I need counsel. Potential identity theft, bank fraud, and misuse of service credentials. What do you have in hand? Instrument number, date, parcel link, and a home binder with a decade of receipts. Good. Start a chain of custody log on anything you touch. Photos with timestamps. Don't confront. From this moment, all contact goes through me. Her voice sharpened. And Mara, no gray areas. We win on paper. Copy. I drove a slow loop through the neighborhood. Mr. Burke was raking his front lawn even though it didn't need raking. He glanced up as I passed and gave a small nod. Across the street, Ms. Klein, the nurse who'd lived there 20 years, set a thermos on her step and watched the road. Not a crowd. Not gossip. Just witnesses. Quiet matters. My phone buzzed at 0823. Caleb. Ellison. Off the record. Something's odd. Application packet has a military ID scan and a signature that looks wrong. Also, notary ID ties to a mobile notary we've flagged before for sloppy logs. I can't send you the file, but if you bring me a police case number and an attorney letter, our fraud unit can freeze pending investigation. Understood, I said. My pen added 2 new bullet points under Phase 4. Case. Counsel letter. Back at the house, I parked 2 doors down and used the back entrance. I was still a legal resident. I moved like a ghost, boots light on old linoleum. The attic door groaned softly. Cold dust rolled out when I pulled the string. I found the box where I knew it would be. My father hates climbing ladders. A banker's box marked tax. Beneath W-2s and junk, a manila folder with my name and my mother's careful cursive. Inside, a photocopy of my military ID, an application form with my name and a signature that leaned uphill at the end, the way mine never does. A sticky note with a mobile notary's first name and number. 3 delinquency notices they'd tucked and forgotten. I took photos of every page, the edges, the signatures. Each shot captured the attic insulation and the box label in the frame. Context is a silent witness. I slid the originals into a tamper-evident envelope I always keep in my ruck and sealed it, initialing across the seam. Chain of custody. Started. Back in the truck, the world steadied. The coffee cooled in its paper cup. Across the street, Mr. Burke leaned on his rake, not intruding, just present. I rolled down the window. Morning, Sergeant, he said. Morning, Gunny, I answered. He nodded at the house without looking at it. Whatever you're doing, do it clean. Yes, sir, I said. By the book. The plan on the napkin wasn't just a plan anymore. It was a map. And maps are how you get out of places people think you'll stay stuck. The next morning, I parked 2 blocks away from the county courthouse and walked into the records office. The fluorescent lights hummed. The air smelled of toner and old paper. The scent of bureaucracy and buried truths. I requested a certified copy of the HELOC instrument. The clerk, a man who'd clearly seen every kind of family feud pass through his window, slid the paper across the counter without comment. There it was. My name, neatly typed. My signature forged. The sight hit harder than I expected. Not anger, not yet, but a dull surgical disbelief. You don't expect betrayal to be notarized. I studied the handwriting. The curve at the M was wrong. My real signature had a downward slant from years of signing under pressure. Whoever had done this had hesitated, tracing confidence they didn't own. Need a copy? The clerk asked. Certified, I said. 2 copies, One for records, one for legal. He stamped the pages with a dull thunk, sealing them in time. Back in the truck, I placed the papers in a clear envelope and photographed each page with my phone. Every soldier knows. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. The next call went to Jenna. "I've got hard proof," I told her. "Describe it." Application with forged signature. My military ID photocopied. Notary log missing. Probably fabricated. The loan's 6 months old. Delinquent. Who signed as the notary? First name only. Wendy. No seal visible. Jenna was silent for a beat. That's enough to open a fraud case. Don't confront them. The minute you tip your hand, evidence starts disappearing. We'll file with the State Attorney General's office under military identity theft statutes. I'll handle the paperwork, but I'll need sworn declarations from you and any supporting witnesses. I have one. A bank contact who confirmed anomalies off the record. Good. And keep a chronological log of every step you take. Date, time, action. Chain of custody must be airtight. As I ended the call, my reflection in the windshield looked like someone halfway between two worlds. Not the uniformed professional from deployments, not the obedient daughter they'd dismissed, but something newly forming between calm, measured, and awake. For a moment, I remembered Logar Province, Afghanistan, the night a supply convoy missed a turn and drove straight into a dried riverbed. The lieutenant froze on the radio, voice cracking, useless. It was me who rerouted the engineers, calculated load weights, and pulled the vehicles out one by one. That night, I'd learned something. Command isn't about title. It's about clarity under fire. Now, the terrain was different, but the principle was the same. My family had turned home into a battlefield, and if they wanted to wage a war of paperwork, I'd fight it by the book. By afternoon, Jenna had emailed a fraud affidavit draft. I filled it out line by line, each entry deliberate. I did not authorize nor sign any equity loan related to parcel .09124423. I was stationed overseas during the transaction. My identity, service credentials, and documents were used without consent. I attached scanned images of the forged pages, my ID, and a deployment order from the same period proving my location. Truth, once structured, becomes armor. When I hit send, the screen blinked. Transmission confirmed. My statement was officially logged into the chain. Later that evening, I parked near the house again. Through the curtains, I saw my father's silhouette in his recliner, remote in hand. My mother moved between rooms, folding laundry like nothing had shifted beneath her feet. They had no idea the battlefield had changed, that their command of silence no longer worked. In the rearview mirror, the sun dipped below the ridge. Its reflection split across the windshield like twin searchlights. In the Army, we call that moment SP, situation present. It's when you realize the enemy isn't hidden anymore. It's right there in plain sight. And as I drove away, I whispered the first line of every operation order I ever wrote. Situation, hostile forces identified. Course of action, proceed with controlled countermeasure. This time, the hostile force wore my last name. When you're deployed, you learn early that no one wins a war alone. Commanders might get credit, but it's the team, the quiet professionals, who carry the mission through the mud. At home, I was outnumbered, but not alone. I just needed to rally the right kind of unit. The first call I made that morning was to Finn, an old classmate turned loan officer at a small regional bank. We hadn't talked in years, but I remembered the way he handled things back in school. Precise, discreet, loyal. When he answered, his voice carried surprise first, then concern. "Sergeant Duffy? Wow, been a long time. You back in Missoula?" "Yeah," I said evenly. "And I need your help, off the record." He hesitated. "Go on." "I'm dealing with a forged second mortgage. Looks like someone used my ID while I was stationed overseas. The documents have already surfaced. I need confirmation of what accounts were opened and by who." Quietly. There was a pause, then a low whistle. "You're serious." "As serious as a security breach," I said. And Finn, if this were a military operation, we'd call this a compromised asset. I need intel before they realize I'm tracing it. Finn exhaled. I'll check. Give me 12 hours. But Milan, this goes deep. Anything I find, you didn't get from me. You were never in the AO, I said. I'll take it from here. When the call ended, I logged the time in my operation notebook. Every detail mattered now. In my world, if the record isn't clean, neither is the result. Next, I drove to Missoula Legal Aid, the small nonprofit tucked between a pawn shop and a diner. Inside, a young volunteer recognized my uniform and stood up a little straighter. Sergeant, how can we help? I handed over a folder, deployment orders, forged signatures, and Jenna's fraud affidavit draft. This isn't about revenge, I said quietly. It's about restoring protocol. Someone abused a soldier's trust. I need jurisdiction clarity and next steps before formal submission. He nodded, eyes scanning the documents. You're doing everything right. Fraud involving active duty credentials escalates to federal jurisdiction. Once this is logged, state lines don't protect them. That's what I needed, a clear chain of command. No emotion, no shouting match, just process. Back in my truck, I scrolled through my contacts again. One name stood out, Jess Riley. Former intel officer, now JAG liaison. She had the tactical brain of a chess master and the heart of someone who'd seen too many good soldiers broken by systems that should have protected them. She picked up on the first ring. Sergeant Duffy, heard whispers you're back. Back, and knee-deep in a domestic insurgency, I said. Identity theft, family link, fraudulent loan under my name during active duty. Copy, she replied, switching instantly into mission tone. You have proof? Signed docs, my deployment overlap. Verification from a bank contact. I'll send scans over encrypted. Good. I'll open a shadow case. Once confirmed, we'll file under Title 18, Section 1028A, Aggravated Identity Theft. It carries mandatory sentencing. Milan, listen to me. This is by the book. No emotion, just evidence and enforcement. Her voice steadied me more than I expected. In her tone was the unspoken truth every veteran understands. When the world stops making sense, you anchor to procedure. Jess, I said quietly, they're my parents. I've seen units betray their own for less, she replied. Honor isn't genetic. It's behavioral. Treat this like any compromise chain. That night, I sat alone in a motel room on the edge of town, one of those places with flickering neon and paper-thin walls. My intel map was spread across the bed. Notes, printouts, timelines, account numbers. It looked like a mission board, and in a way, it was. Phase 1, Intel Recon, complete. Phase 2, Fortify Alliances, underway. I had a JAG officer, a bank ally, and a legal nonprofit. But what I needed next wasn't tactical. It was moral. Because in every operation, there comes a point when the mission has to mean something beyond survival. For me, that came from across the street. Mr. Z. Burke, retired Marine gunny who'd watched me grow up. That night, I saw him on his porch under the porch light, flag behind him, cup of coffee in hand. Evening, Sergeant, he called out. Evening, gunny. You holding the line? Trying to. He gave a slow nod. Then remember this. Marines, soldiers, sailors, we don't fight for thanks. We fight for clarity. Whatever fog you're in, burn through it. That's when I realized my allies weren't just lawyers and contacts. They were every quiet witness who'd seen what I'd built, every neighbor who'd nodded when I came home with dirt on my boots. The command was clear now. Stand your ground. Build your coalition. Move with precision. Tomorrow I'd move to Phase 3. Asset extraction. Not of furniture, not yet, but of truth. By dawn, the fog had settled low over Missoula, blurring the familiar outline of my childhood street. The kind of quiet that usually meant peace now carried a hum of unfinished business. In the military, before you move on a target, you establish chain of evidence. Not emotion, not instinct. Just proof. Without it, every victory is temporary. That morning, my objective was clear. Recover physical documentation. Fraud leaves a paper trail, and my parents were careless with secrets they thought I'd never question. I parked 2 houses down, engine off, hood cooling in the cold air. From the outside, the place looked ordinary. Wind chimes, a sagging mailbox, light still glowing in the kitchen window. But once you've been trained to assess threats, you learn to see what's really there. Compromised ground. I waited until the neighborhood settled into routine. Engines starting, dogs barking, distant school buses, the cover noise of normal life. Then I crossed the lawn and slipped through the side gate. My old house key still worked. A detail they'd overlooked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and dust, the kind of clean that's meant to hide chaos. My boots made no sound on the worn carpet as I moved toward the back hallway. I knew their habits, where they filed old tax forms, where Dad dumped receipts after card games, where Mom stored envelopes marked important. Upstairs in the hall closet behind stacked shoeboxes, I found what I was looking for. A metal file box, the same one they'd used for every family document since I was a kid. I set it on the floor and opened it. Folders, utility bills, bank statements, insurance renewals. And then one tab caught my eye. D. Duffy, property. Inside were photocopies, not originals. My name on multiple forms. A notary stamp half faded. Attached was a stapled packet labeled Collateral Verification. It contained transaction details for the forged second mortgage, including a digital routing number that linked back to my mother's checking account. The moment I saw her handwriting on a deposit slip, the last of my denial cracked. It wasn't just my father's scheme. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was coordinated. Signed, sealed, and deposited. I slid the evidence into a document sleeve, added date and time on a yellow sticky note, and photographed everything for chain of custody. Then I found the missing notary seal, buried inside an old shoebox of random mail. Whoever Wendy was, she'd left behind a business card from a title agency 2 towns over. Another lead. Another link. Footsteps creaked downstairs. Slow, unhurried. My father's. That deliberate rhythm I'd known since childhood. "Grace, you make the coffee?" he called. No answer. I closed the file box, heart steady. No panic. Just process. I waited until he shuffled back toward the kitchen, then moved down the stairs with the practiced silence of someone who'd cleared darker buildings than this. At the bottom step, I paused. His voice carried from the kitchen, talking to himself, muttering about the news, the weather. He didn't know the walls were closing in. At the back door, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass. Calm, upright, precise. The daughter they'd dismissed had been replaced by Sergeant Duffy, evidence custodian. Outside, I exhaled into the morning chill. The fog had begun to lift, revealing the street in sharp detail. I walked back to my truck and locked the folder in the glove compartment. Phase 3 wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming proof, the kind that holds up under scrutiny. In the field, you don't bring back rumors. You bring back coordinates. By midday, I was at the title agency listed on the card. The receptionist looked up, startled by the sight of my uniform. "I need to verify a notary named Wendy. Possibly handled a mortgage packet 6 months ago under the Duffy name," I said. She hesitated, then turned to her computer. "We did have a Wendy. Left the company last year. Let me check archives." Her fingers tapped the keys. A pause. Then, "Here, a notary log signed under Pedro Duffy, witness name Grace Duffy. But," she frowned, "no entry for Milan." I leaned in. "That confirms forgery. Please print and certify this record." Her eyes flicked from the screen to my name tag, then back again. She didn't ask questions, just printed, stamped, and slid the paper across. Outside, I took a steady breath. Every file, every stamp, every timestamp, one more piece in a mosaic that spoke louder than bloodlines. As the sun broke through the clouds, I realized something. In the Army, we call this kind of operation a reclamation mission. Not a raid, not a strike. A reclaiming of what was already yours. By evening, my evidence packet was full. Dates, deposits, witness names, my mother's handwriting, my father's authorization, a notary's illegal omission. I sealed it inside a large manila envelope and wrote across the front in black marker, Operation Reclamation, Proof of Life. That night, I sent scanned copies to Jess and Finn. Jess replied within minutes. This is enough. Chain is clean. Prepare for next phase. Legal engagement. Her message was simple, but its meaning wasn't lost on me. I wasn't running anymore. Tomorrow, we'd stop collecting evidence and start using it. By the time the courthouse doors opened, I was already standing under the Montana flag, uniform pressed, boots polished to a dull mirror. There's a kind of silence that only exists before a mission begins. A tight calm where adrenaline and purpose meet. That was the silence now. Only this time, the battlefield wasn't dust and smoke. It was marble floors and polished oak. Inside, the Missoula County Courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the scent of tired clerks and old justice. I took my place beside Jess Riley, who had flown in from Helena that morning. She set her briefcase on the table and looked over at me. You ready, Sergeant? She asked quietly. I've been ready since they signed my name without asking. Across the aisle, my parents sat stiffly. My father's jaw was clenched, the muscles twitching beneath his graying beard. My mother's eyes darted from the walls to the floor, anywhere but toward me. Between them sat Colt, arms folded, wearing that familiar mask of defiance. A mask I'd worn myself once, before I learned discipline. When the judge entered, we rose. A woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and composed, the kind of person who'd seen every variation of betrayal but still believed in order. She adjusted her glasses and began. Case number 24, 1843, Duffy vs. Duffy. Allegation: fraudulent use of military credentials to secure unauthorized mortgage. The words echoed in the room like a command call. Jess began the way she'd briefed me she would. Calm, factual, surgical. Your Honor, the evidence shows that while Sergeant Duffy was deployed overseas, her personal information and service ID were used to secure a $60,000 loan against her family home. The defendants, her parents and brother, signed as witnesses and beneficiaries. She laid out the documents one by one, the forged signature, the routing slips, the notary log, and the deposit record into my mother's account. Each page hit the table like a gavel. Jess continued, This isn't simply financial fraud. This is the exploitation of an active duty soldier's trust, the weaponization of service against itself. The defense lawyer, a weary man in a loose suit, stood and adjusted his tie. My clients were under the impression their daughter had agreed to assist them. They believed the funds were a shared family resource. Jess didn't blink. Belief doesn't sign contracts. Evidence does. The judge leaned forward. Do the defendants dispute the signature? My father's voice broke the silence. We thought. Do you dispute it? The judge repeated. He looked down. No. My mother's hand trembled on the table. Colt just stared straight ahead, jaw set like stone. Jess continued, voice level. The plaintiff seeks nullification of the fraudulent loan, restoration of her credit record, and full accountability for misuse of federal identity under Title 18. The judge nodded, flipping through the pages. Then her eyes rose to meet mine. Sergeant Duffy, she said, you have anything to add? For a long second, I didn't move. The courtroom felt smaller, like the air had thickened. I straightened my posture, chin lifted, and spoke the way I had at every field debriefing. Your Honor, I took an oath to serve this country, to protect its people, its laws, and its integrity. I never thought I'd have to invoke that oath here, in my hometown, against the people who raised me. But every soldier knows that silence in the face of wrongdoing is complicity. So I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because protocol exists to protect the honorable from the entitled. The words landed heavy. Even the defense lawyer looked away. The judge folded her hands. Understood. She looked to the defendants. This court finds that the evidence supports the claim of forgery and identity theft. The loan is void. All associated debt is annulled. The defendants will compensate the plaintiff for damages and legal costs. My mother let out a small sound. Half sob, half gasp. My father stared at the floor, but the judge wasn't finished. And let this be clear. When you exploit the sacrifice of those who serve, you dishonor not only them, but the uniform that defends you. That dishonor carries consequences. She struck the gavel once. Case closed. The sound reverberated through the room. Short, final, absolute. As we stood to leave, Jess placed a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Milan. You did it. Not yet, I said softly. There's one more phase. Which one? I met her eyes. Aftermath. Outside, the sky was the pale gray of a spent storm. I stood on the courthouse steps, wind tugging at my uniform sleeves. Below, the street was quiet. No victory parade, no music, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like defeat. It felt like peace earned, not given. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a soft hydraulic hiss. It wasn't the sound of triumph. It was the sound of closure. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking away from a battlefield. I felt like I was walking out of one. The Montana air had that crisp, early winter clarity that makes every breath sting a little. Down the steps, I paused, not to look back, but to steady myself in the present. My uniform felt heavier than usual. Not from rank or ribbons, but from everything it had taken to wear it here, in front of them. Across the street, I saw Mr. Burke standing near the flagpole outside the post office, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. When our eyes met, he didn't wave or smile. He just gave a slow, deliberate nod, the kind one soldier gives another when words would only cheapen the moment. I returned it, a quiet salute of understanding. He'd once told me, "We don't fight for thanks. We fight for clarity." And now, for the first time, I finally understood what he meant. I drove to the same diner where this began, a small booth by the window, still carrying the smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee. The waitress recognized me, poured without asking. "Black, right?" "Always," I said. The coffee was as bitter as I remembered, but this time it didn't taste like defeat. It tasted like truth. The kind you earn through scars and sleepless nights. I took a small notebook from my jacket pocket and flipped to the back page where I'd written my operation phases. Phase 1, Intel Recon. Complete. Phase 2, Fortify Alliances. Complete. Phase 3, Asset Extraction. Complete. Phase 4, Legal Strike. Complete. Phase 5, Aftermath. I added a single line under it in small block letters. Mission complete, soldier intact. That night, I didn't go back to my parents' street. There was nothing left there for me. Not bitterness, not nostalgia, not home. Some battles end when you stop trying to reclaim the ashes. Instead, I drove west, toward the small apartment I'd rented on the edge of town, a place no one had touched, no one had named. The furniture inside wasn't just stuff. It was proof of labor, proof of independence, proof of life reclaimed. On the wall opposite my bed, I'd framed one thing. The Roosevelt quote that kept me standing. The credit belongs to the one who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. Every word felt earned now. The messages from my family came for days. Guilt, rage, silence, apology, then rage again. I didn't respond. Every soldier learns about radio silence. It's not punishment. It's protection. Some comms don't deserve reply. A week later, a small envelope arrived from legal aid. Inside was a note, handwritten by the volunteer who'd helped file my case. "Thank you for reminding us what integrity looks like under pressure." It wasn't praise. It was recognition. The kind that doesn't fade with time. In the months that followed, I rebuilt quietly. I trained again, taught new recruits about precision under stress, and saved for the next chapter. Sometimes, during PT at dawn, when the first light hit the frost on the field, I'd think of that night at the dinner table. The knife, the silence, the command to leave. And every time I'd feel the same small smile form, not from spite, but from clarity. They thought they'd exiled me. They just reminded me who I was. Respect doesn't come from bloodlines or orders. It comes from conduct, from doing the hard thing, the right way, even when no one's watching. If you've ever stood your ground quietly, if you've ever been underestimated by those who should have known better, then you already understand. Have you ever seen someone's silence mistaken for weakness? Until the truth came out? Tell me your thoughts below. And if this story spoke to you, like, share and subscribe for more stories like this. We post every day here on Echoes of Revenge, where protocol meets justice and quiet strength finally gets heard.